From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now, or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. This is maybe not appropriate for everybody in the audience today. It details allegations of corruption in ongoing crime in Canada, the kind of stuff that we have covered in previous episodes on the Lost Highway, previous episodes on things like unapprehended serial killers, which unfortunately ended up being a 3-part series. So without further ado, I'd like to share this with you folks and then with my co-host and see what everybody thinks here, because I've been digging in, and I'll be honest, at this point, the situation seems disturbing.
Hi, you can call me Violet. I give permission to use my voice. I live in Vancouver, BC, Canada, and we have a huge conspiracy regarding serial killers. The first serial killer you should look into is Robert Pickton. He owned a pig farm where he fed his victims to his pigs, and the meat he sold in the 90s may have contained human flesh. Currently, there is a 90-plus page document that has been released with all of the details and is currently trying to be suppressed by the VPD and the RCMP. There is a huge suspicion on the RCMP and VPD for their involvement, and they are presently attempting to destroy evidence that they had any involvement in it. Talking out about this has resulted in many people getting death threats, including myself and other outspoken women. This is related to the current situation where the police all over BC are ignoring attempted kidnappings of women and children. And then a woman from that city usually goes missing. They are all around the same age, height, and weight. They are mostly all white. We have had a problem. We do currently still have a problem in BC with missing and murdered Indigenous women. And now women are standing up and demanding the RCMP take us seriously. They are ignoring us. They are dismissing every single one of our claims. Women are being driven off the road. Women are being attempted to be snatched from their vehicles. The RCMP are refusing to help us. Someone needs to speak out and help the women of BC. If you look into the statistics of serial killers in Canada, you will find none, because Canada refuses to release those documents. The RCMP already know that the trucking routes in and out of BC are highly susceptible areas for kidnappings, and they still refuse to do anything about it. The RCMP are involved. The RCMP are involved and or are protecting the people involved. And this is frightening for all of us. There was a child that was almost snatched on his way to school 2 days ago on March 2nd or 3rd. This is serious. No one is taking us seriously. No one is listening to us. We need your help. Please, please, please talk about this on your show, because we need more people to bring attention to this. We need people to speak up for us, because no one is taking women seriously.
Thank you very much for taking the time to reach out to us, Violet. This is profoundly disturbing. I mean, even if some of the incidents that Violet mentions here turn out to be things that are more easily explained, just the experience of being a person in a community suffering from this is psychologically debilitating. So what I would like to do is, Violet, I'd like to walk through some things that doubtlessly you are already well aware of, but your fellow audience members may not be. First, I want to verify that claim about serial killer collection data in Canada. It is much more difficult to come by. than the serial murderer data in the U.S. So difficult to come by that often when experts are looking into statistics or attempting to build metrics for these kinds of crimes in Canada, they use the U.S. as a reference. And the U.S. and Canada are similar in many ways, but I would argue they're not similar enough for that to be the basis of research on Canada. That's what I believe, and I think a lot of people would agree here. So it is also true that Indigenous women and girls, children, are disproportionately targeted, not just by what you would call a serial killer, but also by people who commit sexual assault, also by people who want to waylay someone in an isolated area, maybe steal from them, mug them, rob them, etc. And we know that there's a little better research, oddly enough, well, not oddly enough, more toward the West Coast because of the Highway of Tears. We did an episode of that. That's that stretch of Highway 16 in northern BC where the estimate alone is troubling, an estimated 18 to 50, mostly Indigenous women, have gone missing or been found murdered. Why is that troubling? Because there's a hell of a margin between 18 and 50, right? These are human lives. And that also means that we're only seeing the ones that were reported as of 2019. If you are a listener in the U.S. and you don't live near the Canadian border, you might be surprised to learn the extent of the controversy here, because this has been an ongoing argument. Women's advocates such as Angela Marie McDougall, executive director of Battered Women's Support Services, she and others are arguing that the RCMP is attempting to suppress the truth, or suppress eyewitness reports, possibly, as you said, Violet, also destroy evidence. McDougall specifically points to the larger issue here, which is ongoing sexual violence in that community. And she says, validly, I would argue, that it's completely reasonable for people who might be a victim of these crimes in the future to not completely trust the system, to also have fear that one day they may become one of those victims they are currently fighting for now. The police, McDougall says, are investigating but there's also this question of whether social media is playing a role in this. There are videos you can find, they're being shared on social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, all the hits, where people are noting not only is the RCMP in their perspective being dismissive of the original claims on social media, but in addition to not investigating these claims, they are also asking people to stop spreading the videos. And you can imagine, if you are someone who fits a demographic of a possible victim here, that sounds very much like being ignored, right?
Absolutely.
Very much like being brushed aside and being that one person in the horror movie who says there's a monster and then someone else says it's only the wind. Horror movies are a perfect analogy for these kinds of situations when they're factual, and also for situations like ongoing abuse in relationships. And I don't just mean romantic ones. The thing, though, for the RCMP's part, to catch people up here, is back in February, just last month as we record this, police came forward and said, they reiterated, you need to stop spreading these videos about missing women and alleged abduction attempts because they are unproven rumors. And these videos do run the gamut, if you see them, which you can find these, to say that there might be a serial killer afoot, that there might be human trafficking occurring. and that the authorities are either, well, and again, this is not what we're saying, but this is the argument, and it's important to know. They're saying the authorities are either incompetent, they're either dismissive, or they are willfully in some way covering up. And if they're willfully in some way covering it up, it means they might be colluding. And then also, Violet, you noted possibilities of retaliation, right? Which I heard in there. I'd like to just read a statement from a spokesperson for the RCMP, one Michael McLaughlin, who said, quote, "We have an open mind, but so far there is no evidence to support that any abduction attempt has actually happened. If we see any real risk, we will let the public know. In the meantime, we're asking you to stop spreading unproven rumors." These videos, by the way, a lot of the frequency of these videos increased amid some high-profile disappearances. One, Trina Hunt in Port Moody, 48 years old, vanished January 18th. One, Shalene Keeler-Bell, who was 23-year-old, a mother who vanished January 30th. So with McLaughlin and others in the RCMP, the danger here is that they feel like there may be a public panic spreading based on unfounded speculations and fear, like people drawing another line between situations that might be unrelated and saying it's all part of a larger thing. And then the RCMP specifically says they're worried that people are encouraging one another to carry weapons on their person as a result. But with this in mind, I want to bring it. We felt that this would be an important thing to bring attention to, because no matter what's happening right now, unfortunately, there is proven precedent of a systemic failure on the part of some authorities to acknowledge these situations and these trends. We did discuss Robert Pickton in the past. You guys remember that?
Sure. Yeah, Robert Pickton, man. He's pretty brutal, or he was very brutal. And the problem with that, correct me if you've already mentioned this, Ben, but the problem with that is that rumors were spreading about some serial killer operating in, I think it was mid to late 90s, maybe, that there was a serial killer operating, and then he didn't get picked up until a decade or so later.
Right.
And again, it's that concept of if only... The concept is if only the police or the RCMP or whoever would have listened to the people, saying and raising their hand and saying, "Hey, there's something wrong here. Something is going on." That's the concept. The problem is with police, you cannot take action unless you've got some kind of evidence or connective tissue to crimes, right? I mean, you cannot do it. I don't mean to speak for the officers there as in like, yeah, they're doing the right thing in warning people not to spread these kinds of videos, but it's a tough thing. Like we talk about in the show all the time. How do you know your source? If you've got somebody on TikTok telling you, yeah, there are 5 disappearances that have just occurred, and maybe you don't get all the info and it's very emotionally charged, maybe it's difficult to ascertain what is true and what is being added to it, right? Like in that great game of telephone that everyone has every time another story is shared. I would just say it's difficult for police, and who knows what's going on there. I have no idea. But I would say it's in this tough place where I can't imagine the police acting on social media videos and statements like that unless, people are reaching out directly to the RCMP to make statements that could then be acted upon.
Which is what they've asked people to do. They have said, please stop circulating videos if there's not proof of this. If you do believe that you have been the victim of an abduction attempt, or you believe you have witnessed one, please, they're saying, contact the RCMP directly. Which is, of course, that's what the normal process should be. The argument on the other side, I would imagine, is there will be people saying, I had to resort to the public sphere because I did what I was supposed to do. I tried to report and I was ignored.
Yeah.
Um,
Or
and
people are fearful, as our caller stated, that perhaps there's a connection there between whoever's making the disappearances and, you know, some officer or officers. So I understand that. While I may believe that's unlikely, or hopefully at least unlikely, and would encourage people to continue attempting to reach the authorities like that, that must be a very scary situation.
Yeah, exactly. And this is compounded by statements from experts. There's a researcher I want to draw attention to named Michael Arntfield, who is a criminologist and serial killer researcher at Western University. He studies patterns of homicide for something known as the Murder Accountability Project here in the U.S. And he's one of the people that I leaned into when I was looking at the problem of getting correct and accurate data from Canadian authorities. And he says, first off, he says that from the West Coast to what's called the Golden Horseshoe surrounding Toronto, there's evidence to suggest that not one but multiple serial murderers are hunting and targeting Indigenous women and children. And a couple of the things he says in an interview that he had just a little less than 2 years ago in 2019, he says, we don't know for sure in Canada because no one will give us the data, but for sure you would see Edmonton up to Fort McMurray light up with indications of homicides that's already well established. And he also guesses you would see a higher incidence from Manitoba to Northern Ontario and down to the Golden Horseshoe, Greater Toronto area as well. He says that one of the issues is that murder data in Canada is owned by something called StatsCan, all one word, StatsCan, and that this group decides, rather than experts, who gets to know what, and says that they control the narrative, therefore, on homicide. And, you know, you learn disturbing things with this, like the FBI's Highway Serial Killer Initiative, which we had discussed in its own episode in the past, really put the spotlight on the opportunity that people in the trucking industry might have. And I'm not saying truckers specifically. I'm saying in the industry, living along those interstate routes. There's a troubling number of unexplained disappearances and deaths. So the question is there something we can learn from there, from that research that could be applied up north? The answer is yes. There's a lot we could learn, but it would be our chances of saving lives would be much higher if we had access to the data from that country.
Yep.
You know, and it's a dangerous thing, and it's very easy to sit here on this show and say, well, just give the numbers to the people, give the numbers to the experts, give transparency. There may be intervening variables or reasons that we're not aware of that prevent or disincentivize StatsCan from doing this. But then again, can you really blame people for going to social media to say that they like to do, if they're acting in good faith? Can you blame these people for trying to get the word out about something that they think authorities are ignoring? I don't know if you can. I don't know if you should.
No. I'll say it, Ben. I'm speaking directly to you, people who control the stats of crime in Canada. Get that stuff over to the Murder Accountability Project. The folks over there, like you said, Michael and Thomas Hargrove, all of the guys there, like, just give it to them. Let's see what happens. They've been able to identify clusters, like serial killer clusters in other places in the world, and I think it would be good to do that.
And there's another issue here. You know, we know methodology is kind of the silent melody that data sings, right? And this means, even though it's a poetic phrase, yay, shout out to my old literature teachers, even though it's a poetic phrase, it describes a really important, possibly dangerous thing, which is it's not just what's reported, it's how it's reported, how it's aggregated, and how it's categorized. So consider this. This is a disturbing thing to leave you with, to tell you that there really is a great possibility that there is something amiss. StatsCan has disclosed that the homicide rate for Indigenous women in Canada is 6 times higher than the homicide rate for non-Indigenous women. However, Arntfield points out that too often Indigenous women are not properly listed as murder victims. Instead, their deaths are characterized as accidental death or suicide or something known as death by misadventure. You guys heard of that one?
Oh, yeah. That's the one where you do something stupid, right?
Like
And you die.
Playing on the train tracks or something?
It could possibly describe things like drug overdoses, for instance, or maybe someone becomes inebriated and wanders out into the elements and dies of exposure, things like that. It's considered a somewhat anachronistic term, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Don't you think death by misadventure is a little victim blamey?
It's a little victim blamey. Yeah, they ought to just call it what it is. No, misadventure. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, isn't that the point? Isn't it meant to like imply that you were doing something, like I said, kind of not the smartest thing in the world?
Yeah, that's true. The real difference, like what would be the difference between an accidental death and death by misadventure? There's this strong implication that this was something the victim knew was risky, and it's a behavior or activity that they engaged in despite being aware of that risk, which I don't, that's not a phrase that I am personally comfortable with ascribing to someone, you know? This is something that does not have an easy answer yet. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, the first next step is to release that data. And if it can't, if there's a concern that it would be damaging to an ongoing investigation to release that data publicly, just a general John and Jane blue jeans of the internet, then fine. Do like my pal Matt said, and send it to expert researchers, right? Send it out in such a way that it can be used, and that it can be used in a preventative or predictive manner. There are far fewer serial killers, quote unquote, out there in the world than perhaps true crime documentaries would have us believe. But the fact of the matter is, they are real. You know what I mean? It's not just the wind. And if even one could be brought down, or if even one killer could be brought down, if one life could be saved, then it's, not to quote Emily Dickinson, but it is worth it at that point. Wouldn't you say? Like, what price could you put on that investigation, right? Or the success of that?